Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. I was gone all last week. I was at Legendary Foods. So many exciting things going on out there in California. I'm sure we will get to talk about a lot of this in the upcoming weeks. One of my favorite human beings is on today, Ben Greenfield. And it wouldn't be a Ben Greenfield interview if he wasn't walking in the woods during the interview, which is classic Ben Greenfield. But of course, before we start with that, I have to thank our title sponsor, and that's Legendary Foods, makers of the Tasty Pastry, which, by the way, the Tasty Pastry is in its 1300th iteration. It is better than ever. It tastes better. It's thicker. It's fluffier. It really tastes like you are eating cake, folks. You cannot tell that you are eating something that has less than 1 gram of sugar and 20 grams of high-quality protein. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off. Or listen for the secret word during the commercial break. When you hear it, email it to onair@superhumanradio.net. Include your mailing address, and we will mail you a box of Tasty Pastry so you can try them yourself and see. And now, without further delay, let me get Ben online here.
Hey, Carl.
Yes, brother. What's up, man?
I felt like a bad father a few weeks ago because Ron sent me some of the Tasty Pastries, and I took my my 13-year-old sons down into the kitchen and I showed them how to make a Tasty Pastry, aka a Pop-Tart, in the toaster, and they'd never in their lives seen or heard of a Pop-Tart before. So I had to explain to them what this traditional American comfort food actually was, and they had a Tasty Pastry for the first time before they'd ever had an actual Pop-Tart.
That is so cool. That's
well,
cool.
You know, I have those moments in parenting when I realize that I may have failed as a father, because this also happened 3 months ago. I was at the dinner table with them and brought up the topic of lasagna, and Mom and I were talking about lasagna, and they both said, "What's lasagna?" And I thought they were joking. I said, "You guys have never had lasagna?" And they're like, "No." And Mom and I started thinking, and we said, oh my goodness, I guess we've never actually really made lasagna. And they never had lasagna. So we were in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago for the Conor McGregor fight, and I took him out to Italy to have lasagna. So I am now officially a good father because my boys have had both Pop-Tarts and lasagna.
Well, you realize that if they ever really buy, like if they're ever out, when they're out on their own and they're like, "Oh, Dad gave me a Pop-Tart once. It was called something different," and they actually try a Pop-Tart, they're going to be disappointed because the new Tasty is like so good. I don't even think it's fair to compare it to a Pop-Tart anymore, but that's funny. That's a funny story.
Yeah, well, you know what? They're bacon and eggs kids anyways, though. That's what they wake up every morning, go out to the chicken coop and gather some fresh eggs and whip that up with little pastured pork bacon, and that's typically, 6 days out of 7 what they have. And then occasionally they'll make like cinnamon rolls or something like that because they both like to bake.
So tell me, is this just a normal Ben Greenfield cardio, or are you preparing for a hunt? You're out under the sun again, walking? What's up?
Oh, I'm just getting my vitamin D, charging up my mitochondria with a little bit of photonic energy. And, I probably take about 20,000 steps a day, Carl. I only work out for about 20 or 30 minutes, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon or early evening. I jump in a cold pool typically 2 or 3 times a day for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then I just walk a ton.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's really what really makes us good, walking. So Elisa gets 20,000 steps a day without even trying. I have to work hard to even get 10,000 because I sit a lot in the studio, which is going to change. By the way, do you have an ARX and ARX machine?
Oh, thank goodness. No, Oh,
Okay.
those things are torture. And I say thank goodness no, not because it's a bad device. I love the idea of single set to failure training. I mean, that's, I discovered that way back when I read Doug McGuff's book, Body by Science,
Right.
and began to incorporate some of his super slow training methods. And then I believe it was at Paleo FX in Austin, Texas, I first had a chance to try that ARX machine. And, I absolutely love the efficiency of the workout that it gives you. And I've even interviewed them on my podcast about kind of the science behind that whole machine. But man, oh man, that thing leaves you pretty sore for quite a while. I'm incapable of using it without trying to push and beat my previous record.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, it's if I had one, I'd probably have rhabdo like multiple times per week. But I actually discovered something similar a couple of months ago. It's a full body electrical muscle stimulation suit.
Mm-hmm.
And you just pull it on, and unlike the old models of electrical muscle stimulation, we're talking like high end, kind of like the Russian ARP wave type of systems.
Right.
It's wireless, so you don't have to attach electrodes or anything. You just pull this suit on, and then you go through all your squats, your lunges, your presses, everything else. Well, it's stimming you the whole time, and kind of similar to the ARX. You talk about recruiting muscles you haven't used in a long time and kind of overriding the brain, the central governor in terms of inhibiting a muscle contraction. That thing just absolutely just rips you to pieces in a good way. I mean, there's a definite hypertrophic response to a proper amount of electrical muscle stimulation. And so I don't have an ARX, but I've got that electrical muscle stimulation suit now.
I should have an ARX in about 2 months. I'm looking for. Ron Penna has one in his home gym, and I've tried it. And you're right. It's you can't use it too often because it will actually force you into overtraining at some point in time.
Oh yeah. But I mean, in terms of efficiency and a time hack, if you're willing to accept the fact that you can get away with just a couple of strength training sessions a week, if you do single set to failure training, and you're not dicking around with a bunch of extra stuff, so you're not recovering properly in between sessions, it actually is quite efficient. I have a few of those clients with unlimited wallets who ask me like, okay, if I want the best of the best in my home gym, and I want the coolest biohacks ever, I tell them, well, all right then, for strength, get an ARX, and for cardio, get a Vasper, right? And that right there is like $100,000 worth of exercise equipment.
Right.
And just put those next to each other. Do the Vasper 3 or 4 times a week, do the ARX fit a couple times a week, and you've got pretty much all your cardio and strength bases covered.
Right. So you have no need to put out content on average. I mean, you produce a great deal of content. And when I saw this, I thought, Ben, why another cookbook? But I have to believe this is in response to a lot of your followers and clients. Do people reach out to you and ask you for recipes and stuff?
Well, it is interesting because I went for a long time until I finally decided to do a cookbook, thinking that cookbooks are kind of a thing of the past, right? It's kind of silly. I can Google a recipe in no time flat, see all the reviews of that recipe, see videos of that recipe, see how people have modified that recipe, and have it printed out from my computer on my phone, again, within a few seconds, and I can make food. It's incredibly efficient. But what I realized, as my own audience was increasingly kind of reaching out to me, was I'd post some cool recipe on Instagram, like, oh, here's how I combined a pressure cooker and a sous vide, or here's so you could like smoke bone marrow and use it as the butter for a lobster, or here's 3 different cocktails I make that don't have any alcohol in them, but that give you the same buzz or the same type of whatever sexual enhancement or feeling or anything else you'd be looking for from a cocktail. And so I've got all these random recipes sprinkled on Instagram, or I'll hop on a podcast and on my intro to the podcast talk about some whatever reverse sear steak with coffee rub that I had the night before, and people kept asking me recipe. And yeah, they're out there just scattered around Instagram or whatever. But I thought, okay, so if I give everybody this big, beautiful, coffee table like cookbook with the best of the best recipes, will people actually use that? And it turns out it was something people actually wanted. And I think, this is good advice for anybody in like the health and fitness or nutrition industry who would think about doing this. like, if you're going to do a cookbook, just make sure that it's like all unique stuff that's come from inside your head, because otherwise you're just putting out the same recipes that people are going to find on Google. But what I want to do is just take all the weird stuff that I put my own twist on, how to biohack a cocktail, how to, make a superfood smoothie, 8 different things you could do to a ribeye to make it taste even better, how to cook organ meats and make them taste good. Just all that stuff that's kind of like random and weird. And then, you put that stuff together. And I had imposter syndrome writing this cookbook, Carl, because I don't really think of myself as a chef. It's like my kids and my wife, they're like freaking trained chefs. They've taken tons of cooking classes, and my kids have a cooking podcast, and my wife's been cooking from scratch, and she's a little rancher girl growing up in Montana, and I grew up making myself macaroni and cheese and Pop-Tarts. And
Right.
so, I've had to learn a ton over the past few years, just cooking and trying, and, interviewing nutritionists and chefs on my podcast, and occasionally jotting down something they tell me as something for me to try later on. And, after kind of dicking around in the kitchen for like 3 or 4 years, I finally feel like I was able to overcome imposter syndrome and actually wrap my head around things like molecular gastronomy and how to use some of the things I learned in college in terms of chemistry and salt and sugar and heat and fat and recipes. And, so I just basically, the way I operate is I throw a whole bunch of noodles at the wall and see what sticks, and I'll just try different variants of a recipe over and over again, and finally gather together about 40 or 50 of them and put them together in this cookbook.
So I just put the image up of the cookbook. I'm going to put it back up. So if you go to shrnetwork.biz/boundless cookbook, you'll find a link right to the book. The book is called Boundless Cookbook by Ben, and it's assembly of a lot of the things that he was just talking about. Different dishes that he's improvised on, made them better, made them fit. When someone asks me about a diet, I always ask them, what's your goal? Because without knowing the person's goal, suggesting a diet is really not a good thing to do. If somebody's goal is to lose body fat, somebody's goal is to reverse autoimmune disease, somebody else's goal is to build muscle. These are all different approaches to diets. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, although sometimes you don't need a specific goal per se, because when you look at biochemical individuality and genetics, sometimes it's simply eating in a way that correlates best to your genome, and that's a lot of times based on ancestral eating, local eating, seasonal eating, analyzing your genetic patterns to see what you're actually kind of equipped to deal with. But the interesting thing, and it's kind of funny because I was having a conversation about this last night when I took my wife on a date and we were having dinner, and we were talking about how plants are actually really, really complex. Like when I was talking with her, she has a little bit of Raynaud's, and I was discussing with her some of the research on how cold baths done repetitively for a few days in a row, even that short a period of time, has been shown to get rid of this Raynaud's, this blood flow restriction to the extremities in response to cold. And part of that is in response to cold, the liver engages in glycogenolysis and creates more blood glucose, because anytime that you add more sugars or salts or anything like that to a fluid, it will freeze at a lower temperature. And this is the same reason you'd put like salt in water before you cook rice. The water will heat at a higher temperature and the rice will cook more effectively or more quickly. And so I was explaining to her this idea that humans have the capacity to be able to put more sugar into the bloodstream or remove sugar from the bloodstream in response to heat or cold, as a way to adjust our ability to be able to deal with certain temperatures. In addition to that, we have things like mitochondrial uncoupling proteins that would allow us to, in seasons of heat or exposure to sunlight or living in an equatorial climate, allow us to actually deal with the higher throughput of sugars, which create reactive oxygen species, but light photons help you to be able to combat a lot of those effects of the reactive oxygen species created by carbohydrate consumption, thus dictating, and what I'm getting at here is that, a human being is able to like wander around anywhere on the planet, and kind of like their body will adjust pretty quickly to the type of diet that predominates in that area of the climate or the type of foods that are growing in that season. So we're highly plastic when it comes to the ability to be able to feed ourselves with a wide variety of substrates, even though from a genetic standpoint, we tend to do best with something close to what our ancestors have eaten for a long period of time.
Right.
But at the same time, like you can't take a banana tree from Africa and plant it in Sweden and have it thrive and flourish, because plants, they can't move. It's the same reason they have their plant defense mechanisms built in, like gluten and lectin, since they don't have teeth or armor or claws or hooves to be able to defend themselves. But they're very, very good at creating tons of energy when planted in a seasonal location in which they thrive. Whereas, humans, you can't necessarily plant us in the ground and expect us to be able to defend ourselves that well or to be able to feed ourselves that well. But even though we don't have those mechanisms, we've got bigger brains, we've got smart organs that allow us to do things like increase sugar or salt concentrations in the bloodstream. And so we can, you could take that same area of Africa, and instead of taking a banana tree, take a human being, like, someone of African-American descent, and put them in Sweden. And, they're within a matter of weeks going to be able to adapt to a fish-based diet that's got maybe some milk in it and higher amounts of fats, and they'll start to shift their physiology in a way that allows them to deal with that food. So humans are very dynamic, right, in terms of their ability to be able to deal with different types of foods. But ultimately, kind of a long-winded answer to your question, yeah, I mean, any time you're eating a certain food group or talking about a specific diet, you have to determine the objective first. That's definitely important.
Before we get into some of the things people will learn in the cookbook, I'm not sure if you're a fan of carnivore. There's a movement, obviously. It's a very, very good elimination diet. Dr. Shawn Baker has popularized it. Where do you stand on this all meat diet?
Well, it kind of depends, Carl. Like I remember I was at Mark Bell's. I'd done a podcast with Mark Bell on his show in Sacramento, and we were driving back over to Mark's for dinner afterwards. And Mark said, "I'm trying out this thing called the carnivore diet. Just warn you, we're just gonna have steaks for dinner." And I was like, oh, "Okay, well, I like steak. I can do steaks for dinner." And so, sure enough, we get to his house and he pulls some ribeye steaks from the fridge and grills them up. We sit there having a steak, and I thought that was my first exposure to like just eating nothing but meat with no bread, no potatoes, no salad, nothing on the side, no wine, nothing, just a steak. And and my brain kind of got thinking in the background of sitting there having that steak. Geez, there's got to be some nutrient deficit you're going to build over a certain period of time just eating ribeye steaks for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And and then I've also talked with Shawn Baker and heard him interviewed a few times. And he's like, yeah, you get your giant orange, shopping cart full of ribeye steaks from Costco and just have a ribeye for breakfast and ribeye for lunch and ribeye for dinner. And, and that popular variant of the carnivore diet that is what was popular like 2-3 years ago is a diet that I think is just chock full of excess methionine and excess tryptophan, low in glycine, and low in some of the other fat-soluble nutrients that one should be getting from a diet and that one could be getting from a properly comprised carnivore diet that's more of the nose-to-tail variant that a guy like Paul Saladino made popular. Because I heard Paul on Mark Bell's podcast. I texted Paul because I got his number from Mark, and I flew him over to my house like 2 years ago, and he and I talked for like 2 hours about all the science behind like a properly comprised nose-to-tail carnivore diet. And after that interview, I told Paul, all right, I'm going to try it. So for 12 weeks, I did it right. I did liver and bone broth and organ meats and marrow. And yeah, some steak, but not a lot of it so that I wasn't getting excess methionine, which kind of has a life-shortening type of effect. And I felt great. And I even have a lot of recipes in my book that are designed not only for nose-to-tail eating, but also for those who might want to follow a carnivore diet. But I gradually began to introduce just intuitively things that I thought were still appropriate without the built-in plant defense mechanisms, like berries and fruits, like bee products like honey and bee propolis and bee pollen. Introduced some more beverages, like a little bit of coffee, a little bit of tea, a little bit of wine, and a few underground storage organs, like sweet potato and yam and parsnip and beet and some of those root organs that tend to have less of the digestive distressing compounds in them, like a carbohydrate such as wheat or amaranth or quinoa might. And I felt pretty good on that diet, and feel like I could have eaten that diet for the rest of my life. Versus, there's no way that I could eat ribeye steaks for breakfast, lunch, and dinner my whole life and be comfortable about the biochemical fallout of that, from a physiology standpoint. But the problem is that it's highly socially restrictive. I'm a foodie. I like to travel the world, and I like to, eat spaghetti in Italy, and I like to have sushi in Japan, and I like to take my wife out for dinner and my kids and try like 5 different foods and share them family style at the table. And it's just, you can't do that too well on a diet that restricts most wheat and grains and most plants. And so I think if your gut is not inflamed and you don't have any autoimmune conditions, and you're able to deal with a wider variety of food than what the carnivore diet would dictate, that's just fine. But a nose to tail properly comprised carnivore diet, especially for people with autoimmune issues, people who want to simplify their diet, people who have gut problems that they need to heal. I've tried it. I've had some clients use it. I've got recipes based around that diet in my cookbook, and I think it's just fine. Of all the diets out there, I think it's one of the better diets, especially for active people.
When nose to tail is the new saying, but the reality is, and you know this because you're an avid hunter, if you come upon an animal that has been run down by wild dogs, freshly, like just run down today, what the dogs eat is everything inside the offal, the entrails, the liver, the heart, the lungs. They eat all of that, and they leave behind much of the muscle meat, unless they didn't have enough to eat, and then they'll start eating on the muscle meat. And it's funny because we think that being a refined human being is avoiding all of that stuff, and that really is where the methionine intake is balanced. As you point out, glycine can actually reduce the effects of methionine, the negative effects of methionine. And but people don't eat any of that. They just eat muscle meat. That's all they eat.
Yeah. Methionine, and to a lesser extent, tryptophan. Those are the 2 amino acids that tend to become the most imbalanced when someone is not including glycine or proline-rich sources in their diet. Part of me wonders too if the reason that dogs or even early humans would have not eaten much of the muscle meat is because a lot of those collagenous fibers, especially from areas of the animal, like let's say the brisket, right? You go to Austin, Texas, and you have wonderful, wonderful brisket there. I just got back from Austin, but they're cooking it for 12 to 24 hours to break down the collagen, to make it digestible, to decrease the amount of digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid necessary to assimilate that collagen. And so, when I cook meat, and a lot of the recipes in the cookbook are like this, I'll either use slow, long cooking methods with really good acidic medians like vinegar or lemon, or surprisingly, a lot of people don't realize this, but even like buttermilk and kefir and some yogurts act as really, really good ways to break down some of that collagen for your marinade, and then do a really slow cook afterwards. And that collagen becomes a lot more bioavailable. And so I think you could make a case for long, slow cooking, making a lot of those muscle meats a little bit more palatable, and the proteins more bioavailable by the human body. But then the other thing that's kind of cool is if you don't have time, you can use what I actually use quite a bit when I need to do a brisket, or I need to do like ribs would be another example of a food that's very collagenous that has to be broken down with long, slow cooking. And I don't know if you've used this before, Carl, but a pressure cooker. A pressure cooker is absolutely amazing. I mean, I can put an entire rack of ribs in there with some bone broth, a little bit of wine, some spices of choice, like maybe some salt, some pepper, some paprika, a splash of hot sauce, and toss a handful of onions or carrots or mushrooms in there. Close the lid, turn it on, walk away, come back, and 40 minutes later, I've got a dish that would have taken me 6 to 12 hours to do on a grill, and it's just done because of the pressure.
Well, have you ever made an artichoke in the pressure cooker?
No, but that sounds really fascinating. How do you do it?
Dude, if you make an artichoke in the pressure cooker, it only takes about 30, 40 minutes. You can lift it out when it cools and eat it like an apple. You could bite into any area of it, and it's all as soft as the heart.
Oh, that's crazy, because an artichoke is just a giant thistle. I'm gonna have to try this.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I want to take our first break. I want to plug the book again real quick for people who are listening to the podcast versus watching the podcast. If you go to shrnetwork.biz/boundless cookbook, all one word, You'll be able to learn more about the book and get it there. And of course, Ben, your website is Ben Greenfield Fitness, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But everybody knows that. BenGreenfieldFitness.com is the other place. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to learn about some of Ben's favorite recipes, and I also want to learn what Ben thinks about raw unpasteurized milk. Stay tuned. You are listening to and watching Superhuman Radio. We'll be right back. Is there something interfering with your happiness or ability to achieve your goals? BetterHelp can help. They will assess your needs and match you with a licensed therapist. This is not a self-help or crisis line. It's professional counseling done securely online. They have a broad range of experts and are available worldwide without having to wait in an uncomfortable waiting room. Get the help you need and start living a happier life today. Go to shrnetwork.biz/betterhelp. That's better, HELP, and receive 10% off your first month of counseling when you use the code SHR. Redcon One's new BAR bar is the ultimate soft-baked protein-packed snack bar, powered by peanut butter. Perfect for while on the go to help curb hunger or sneaky sweet tooth cravings. With 20 grams of protein, use as a meal replacement bar or when you're in need of a high-protein snack. Eat a Redcon One bar as a midday snack or for fuel before an intense training session. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Redcon1 and use the code SHR25 and save 25% off these delicious bars today. Hey, this is Carl Lenore. Superhuman Radio is the longest-running health, fitness, and anti-aging podcast in the world, going into our 16th year of continuous production. If you have a product that you think would appeal to the Superhuman Nation, we can get you on the air quickly and inexpensively to help promote your brand. Join the ranks of some of the largest and most successful companies in the world who know how great it is to be affiliated with Superhuman Radio. Contact Dan Kapitsky today. That's Dan.Kopitzke at superhumanradio.net to learn more. Cookbook.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Attention meat lovers. I've discovered a snack with just 2 ingredients, meat and salt. That is so tender and delicious, you almost can't believe it. That's right, no soy, sugar, or other crap. Our partner, Carnivore Snacks, nailed it with these mouth-watering snacks. They have a variety too. Ribeye, pork loin, leg of lamb, and more, all sourced here in the USA from regenerative farms. Claim your superhuman offer from Carnivore Snacks today at shrnetwork.biz/snacks. That's SNAX. Use the code SUPERHUMAN for 15% off your first order, plus a free 2-ounce pork loin. If you spend any amount of time sitting while at work, like I do, I have the chair for you. The Back Strong chair from All 33 is the most comfortable office chair I've ever sat in. That's the truth. Their patented technology allows your body to move the way it's supposed to move while you sit. Designed by a chiropractor to position your pelvis in a way that stacks all 33 of your vertebrae into perfect alignment. The benefits of this ideal posture include relief of back pain, deeper breathing, better digestion, improved circulation, greater focus, sharper memory, and more productivity. Start experiencing these benefits today. Go to shrnetwork.biz/move and use the code SHR100 for a $100 discount on your Back Strong chair.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. We're ripped and we're ready.
Welcome back to Superhuman Radio. We're here with Ben Greenfield today talking about his new book. It's a cookbook. Who thought that Ben would write a cookbook? He's got so much stuff that he regularly discusses on his podcast and his writing. And this cookbook really floored me because it's a fantastic cookbook. I'm going to get into some of your favorite recipes, Ben. But before we do that, where do you stand on raw unpasteurized milk? Are you a fan, not a fan?
I didn't really do a lot of dairy for years growing up. My parents were super into feeding me and my brother's milk. And I remember we'd go to Albertsons in Lewiston, Idaho, And, I would always walk out of there with no fewer than at least, 2 of the gallon, plastic jugs of 2%, homogenized pasteurized milk. And I would get what I thought was a stomach flu or stomach upset at least a couple of times a month. And I didn't find out until college that I was lactose intolerant. And, I of course don't doubt that many of the other elements in that milk may have been contributing to a little bit of an autoimmune response, particularly the fact that most pasteurized milk is also homogenized, which means that the proteins are separated from the fats, and thus in many people, the proteins can cross into the bloodstream and produce a little bit of an antigenic response. And, as opposed to homogenization, where the protein and the fat globules are still combined together, and you get a little bit less of that protein absorption occurring. The other problem, I think, is that, pasteurization, especially high heat pasteurization, a lot of people are using 260 to 280 degrees Fahrenheit these days to high heat pasteurize the milk. That's quite common. You kill off, really a lot of the microbes and a lot of the bacteria and a lot of the elements that would be related to the healthy hygiene hypothesis, or this idea that by exposure to a lot of these microbes and bacteria, we actually allow the immune system to grow stronger. And yeah, I mean, in the early 1900s, when pasteurization was first introduced, as a response to, I believe, tuberculosis, we had farms that were probably a little less clean, possibly a little bit less of an understanding of some of the more harmful microbes and how to control those. And perhaps there could be a case made for pasteurization at one time, but now they've got clean farms. It's kind of like in the Old Testament, in the Bible, God commanded the Israelites not to eat pork, and it wasn't because pork is evil. It's just because pork back then, they were garbage eaters, they were trash eaters, and pork especially, or pigs especially, tend to concentrate a lot of that in their meat, in their fats. And God kind of knew what he was doing in having the Israelites not eat, toxin feeders like lobster and shellfish or pork or things like that. But now we've got access like super clean pigs from super clean farms. These wonderful pastured pigs aren't eating trash and fecal matter and sewage. And so that idea of avoiding pork is all of a sudden not so important, really, for health reasons. And I would say the same for pasteurization, because the microbes and the bacteria that we're exposed to that allow the immune system to grow stronger in response to something like an unpasteurized milk, I think is a big benefit. They've done research on raw unpasteurized milk and shown a reduced risk of allergies and asthma in children who consume it. The lactase enzyme persists in raw and unpasteurized milk, dictating that people who are lactose intolerant can often digest raw and unpasteurized milk just fine. I mentioned earlier in the first part of our interview that I like to use as a meat marinade, buttermilk or kefir or yogurt. And one of the reasons for that is that there's a lot of bioactive enzymes in there that help to break down the collagen and some of the fibers in a meat, allowing it to be more tender upon cooking. And so you're getting access to a lot more enzymes, and in addition to more beneficial bacteria in raw and unpasteurized milk. And I think the pros outweigh the cons if you're getting it from a clean source, really.
Yeah. So there's a book I'm going to text you to remind you. I had Dr. Ron Schmid on my show with Randy Roach back in 2006. Ron wrote a fascinating book called The Untold Story of Milk, and you would enjoy it. The drive. So when milk was being delivered to the cities by the farmers, they had no problem with it. But then what happened was the distilleries decided, we've got this mash left over. We bottle stuff. Why don't we go into the milk business? We're in the city. We'll be able to deliver it faster. So when they started feeding cows the leftover mash, the cows all got mastitis. And there's something called the swill milk epidemic of 1909, I believe it is, or 1903, where 1,100 children died in New York City from drinking the milk sold to them by the distilleries. And since the distilleries had so much money from making booze, instead of the government saying, you just killed a bunch of people, get out of the business, they said, hey, we heard about this thing called pasteurization. Give us one more chance. So pasteurization wasn't used because it was better. It was used so that a group of businessmen who had no business being in the milk business wanted to stay in the milk business. And it's a fascinating book. It's called The Untold Story of Milk. And it's a fast read, but it will change your opinion. Yeah, there was no lactose intolerance before pasteurization. No one was, because there was lactase in the milk. But anyway, and that's why.
Yeah. That reminds me a little bit of the fluoride story. You know, we had to find a use for fluoride from industrial waste, and so we wind up fluoridating the water.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite dishes in this cookbook, Ben, that people can go right to?
Well, I like pesto. I'm a fan of pesto, and it turns out that wild plants have a lot of these built-in plant defense mechanisms we were talking about earlier. But there's a reason why we see a lot of the blue zones, for example, and areas where people live a disproportionately long period of time, a high intake of a wide variety of plants and herbs and spices in many cases, because of the mild hormetic effect that they can induce and the upregulation of endogenous antioxidants and greater nutrient density, and even the biophotons of light that you get from wild plants that retain that light output upon consumption can allow for better ATP production and mitochondrial health versus, say, like plants that have been sitting inside the grocery store for a few days. And so one recipe that I like is you just go out to your backyard and you get some wild plants. Dandelion probably being the easiest for a lot of people. Dandelion's wonderful for the liver, for the gallbladder. It's like a superfood, and unfortunately we kill it. But if your neighbors aren't spraying pesticides and herbicides and you have a clean lawn, you can harness dandelion. I also like to harness, a little bit of nettle. There's some plantain leaf, a little wild mint. If you have a backyard garden, you can also, use a little rosemary, a little thyme. You can also just go to the grocery store and replicate this recipe without wild plants. But, I'll gather all those wild plants and I'll just bring a bag back and put them in the food processor. I'm one of those guys who likes to get, related to the discussion that we just had, just natural bacteria. So I don't even wash the plants. I'll even leave a little dirt on there and stuff. And that's up to folks if they want to do that. But then I'll put some walnuts, some olive oil, sometimes some pine nuts, some salt, some pepper. I'll grab a lemon and shave off a little bit of the outside of a lemon, and put that in there. And then I blend that up for like this wonderful wild plant pesto. And I actually like to smear that on top of my steaks when I have steak. It's just wonderful. It's like a steak sauce. And so that's one recipe, is just this idea of using plants from the wild plant kingdom and blending them together. Like pesto is so easy to make. And for people who are dairy intolerant, they even have a tip in there. And this is like some parts of the book are more advanced. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure. But you can take those plants and take some yogurt, or like some sauerkraut juice, or some kimchi juice, or anything fermented in your fridge, and just cut up all the plants and put them in a giant mason jar and dump a little bit of that yogurt strain or kimchi strain or sauerkraut strain in there, toss a little bit of salt in there, and then just like press it down and put it on the counter and just ferment the plants on your countertop. And I'll a lot of times have plants just fermenting on the countertop for 1 or 2 weeks, and they develop this wonderful, rich, umami, salty flavor that you can then make your pesto with. You make your pesto with the fermented plants instead of like the regular fresh plants. And if you don't like to use Parmesan cheese because you're dairy intolerant, you get all the same taste of a pesto made with Parmesan cheese, but fermenting the plants gives you that same umami flavor instead. So that's kind of a fun one, and I eat a lot of pesto and really like that recipe. Another one that I like, because I drink coffee a lot, and so I've always got these spent coffee grounds on the counter, is I'll just lay them out in the sun to dry, or put them in a food dehydrator, or lay them out in a baking sheet in the oven, about 100, 125 degrees, and dry the coffee for a couple hours. And then I've got basically a coffee rub, and I find the coffee rub is more flavorful than if you use just regular coffee that isn't spent coffee grind, but just fresh coffee. Plus, it's just a better way to recycle some of your used coffee grounds. And then I'll blend that up with a little bit of cayenne, a little bit of salt, a little paprika. Sometimes I'll throw some turmeric or some pepper in there, and I make this coffee rub. And that coffee rub, it's great as a chicken rub, as a pork rub, as a beef rub. Just the flavor in it is great. And then, of course, if you're grilling, the coffee has a lot of antioxidant that help to manage some of the carcinogenic potential, the blackening that occurs when you're grilling. And so you've got some of that going for you as well, especially if you toss a little rosemary or thyme on your steak as you're cooking it as well. So the coffee rub's another real popular one. I've got a lot of feedback from people who are now making their own rubs at home, because a lot of store-bought rubs have, MSG and they'll spray down a lot of those spices with herbicides and pesticides, and they're non-organic, but it's so easy to make your own rubs and spices at home. And that coffee rub is one. It's kind of surprised me how much feedback I got on that and how much people are just loving, making their steaks or their roast chicken or whatever with a coffee rub. And then, even there's just, it's hard. It's like you're asking me what my favorite kit is, but let me think of another one I'm a fan of donuts. I grew up with my dad taking me on donut dates, but of course, we know that vegetable oils, even more than sugar, are one of the worst things to put into your body just based on their effect on cell membranes and, the advanced glycation end products and disruption of cardiolipin and the mitochondrial membrane, just so, the host of damaging effects from vegetable oils. So, there's not a lot of fried recipes in the book, but my sons and I experimented with a whole bunch of different variations of how to make a donut and how to do like a really healthy baked donut, out of coconut flour or almond flour. And we came up with a couple of recipes for like a cacao nut butter donut. And there's I'm blanking. I think the one we put in there might've been the lemon strawberry. I don't remember. But anyways, we really figured out how to kind of crack the code on making a healthy donut. And so, I can have a donut now and, in the morning or like as a dessert after a meal, dip it in a little coffee, because I like to dip my donuts in coffee. And these donuts taste amazing. They're like these guilt-free, healthy, kind of like paleo-ish baked donuts. And that's another one I've gotten some good feedback from people on. Although, every single recipe we had to send to a test kitchen to get just like, that's what happens if you're going to do a cookbook right. Like you got to spend a little bit of money. I probably spent almost $80,000 on just the test kitchen to test every single recipe forwards and backwards and figure out, is every single step foolproof? And does this actually result in the exact texture people wanted? And it was kind of fun because they actually modified some of the, everything from a little bit of the baking powder to the ratios and everything in the donut recipe to make it even better. So that was kind of cool, just getting like professional chefs in a test kitchen to get to take my recipes and then make them even better. Just because two heads are better than one. And these folks are kind of cooking them in the way that other people might if they open the cookbook and thinking of things I might not have thought of. So that was pretty fun too, just get them done in the test kitchen. But yeah, I'd say those are a few recipes that come to mind, even though, again, there's so many.
The average person eats, I forget if it's 9 or 11 different things every single week. And I think that if you buy this book and you find one recipe, just one, that you love and you incorporate it into that 9 to 11 foods that you eat a week, then it's a pure win. And I'm sure you're going to find a lot more. So you can get the book or learn more about the book by going to shrnetwork.biz/boundless cookbook. Ben doesn't put anything out that he stands behind that isn't perfect. So this book is fantastic. Elisa's got it at home. We've already been going through it. We're going to be experimenting with some of these recipes. Stay with me through this break, Ben. We're going to take one last commercial break, and we'll wrap it up with Ben Greenfield. Stay tuned. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High-quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/whiteoak and use code SHR20 to save 20% off your entire first order. I need to share with you all a revolutionary new wearable technology called HapBee. HapBee allows you to enjoy the effects of caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, melatonin, and muscle relaxants without actually ingesting anything. Yes, really. They figured out the unique magnetic signature of each of these molecules and recorded them. Just put the HapBee on, choose the signal you want, and it starts projecting the magnetic signature of that molecule that you choose, like coffee for feeling alert. Go to hapbee.com/SHR. That's HAPBEE.com/SHR SHR to learn more and unlock an $80 discount exclusively for the Superhuman Radio listeners. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today. Every day, there's a new wellness trend. Eat that. Do this. Avoid those. How do you know where to start or who to trust? Inside Tracker helps you cut through the noise by analyzing your blood, your DNA, your lifestyle, and your fitness tracker to provide you with a science-backed, trackable action plan on how to live, age, and perform better. Personalized, one-size-fits-one recommendations to help you optimize you. For a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering Superhuman Radio listeners 25% off the entire store. Go to shrnetwork.biz/inside tracker, INSIDETRACKER, to save 25% off. Change begins on the inside. Cookbook. Knoll Creek Hemp Company's Delta 8 soft chews are the premier Delta 8 product on the market today. Knoll Creek's Delta 8 is produced from high-quality hemp-derived CBD oil, and soft chews are manufactured using proprietary nano-emulsification technique that ensures the Delta 8 soft chew will timely deliver the desired effects cleanly and consistently from piece to piece. In a space where at least 70% of the products fail to meet label claims and where most users of conventional hemp products are left disappointed, Knoll Creek's Delta 8 soft chews are a product you can trust. Visit shrnetwork.biz/delta8. That's DELTA and the number 8, and use the code SHR20 to get 20% off your first order today. I keep saying the number one killer is insulin resistance. Managing blood sugar is the key to living long and aging well. But we all like to eat starchy carbohydrates and sugars from time to time. How do I manage this? I use a product called Blood Sugar Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. This easy-to-take supplement is the result of numerous tests to find the absolute best formula for maintaining healthy blood sugar. Blood Sugar Breakthrough works to safely lower blood sugar after meals so that you can maintain a healthy weight and redirect carbohydrates to your muscles where they can be burned as energy. This means you'll avoid the worst effects of high blood sugar, like weight gain and advanced aging, while enjoying more stable energy, mental clarity, and fewer cravings. Go to shrnetwork.biz/blood sugar and save 10% with code SHR10 today.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. Don't hate us because we feel good.
Welcome back to Superhuman Radio. We're talking with Ben Greenfield today about his new cookbook. You can find out more about the cookbook by going to shrnetwork.biz/boundless cookbook. The book is great. I mean, I already found some recipes that I'm looking forward to experimenting with, and I'm sure you will as well. So check it out. Hey, Ben, I want to thank you for being here today, brother.
Dude, thanks for having me on, Carl. You know, the only problem is whenever I have a chat with you on your podcast, I'm hungry afterwards. Either A, due to the fact that there's so many tasty foods that you talk about in your commercials, or B, due to the fact that we talk about food. At some point, we're going to have to get together and break bread. Are you going to the Keto Expo in Las Vegas?
I don't think so. When is it? When do you...
It's in October. I was just kind of scanning my
brain.
No,
October I have a family. Yeah, October I have a family wedding to go to in Napa, and then Elisa and I got to take a birthday trip too, because that's her birthday month as well. But we'll get together. I'm going to be going out to Legendary more. I'll be on that coast for a while, so I'll come up and visit you for sure, no doubt.
Okay, great. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to cook a steak and ship it to you via FedEx.
There you go. Hey, Ben, thanks for being here, man.
All right. Thanks, Carl. I'll catch you on the flip
side. There's one other thing that I want to talk about today, and it's very, very important to me. I'm not going to rant about it, but I'm going to be very, very polite about it. Stop telling people to get vaccinated. No one asked you. Stop posting on Facebook, get the vaccine. I want to show you how this works. Couple years, we've been talking about abortion. And everybody said, my body, my choice. And we had to be cool with that. Well, my body, my choice. If I don't want to get a vaccine, just because you did, don't lay this nonsense on me that I'm endangering other people by not getting vaccinated. Because if the vaccine works, you have nothing to worry about. So I almost said a horrible word. This logic, this illogical logic that's being foisted upon us today is nonsense. The vaccine isn't flawless. In one small county in Massachusetts, 4,000 new cases in people who have been vaccinated already. More importantly, the UK just published a paper identifying something. There's two good studies out there right now. Actually, three, but the third one I can't mention because I can't remember who published it. Australia and the United States have done a study together, and now the UK just published a paper that the new Delta variant is being found almost exclusively in people who have already been vaccinated. There is a phenomenon. I had to ask Elisa to send me this, but there is a phenomenon, antibody-dependent enhancement of the SARS-CoV-2 virus has already been identified that only people who are vaccinated are having these problems where these new variants are emerging. Now, they proved this same thing years ago with the dengue flu vaccine. Same thing happened. New strains, once they started vaccinating people, new strains. Now we're seeing it, and both the UK and Australia and the United States have published papers showing this. So keep this in mind. In the same breath that people say, well, the vaccine isn't supposed to protect you from getting COVID, that's complete bullshit, because that was the premise that they got it approved. Moderna and all these companies had to show that it prevented you from getting the virus in the first place. But now that so many people are still getting the virus even after being vaccinated, the story is turned, and now it's, the symptoms won't be as bad. That's also bullshit, because I know people who've gotten the vaccine and ended up in long hospital stays. And there's some numbers floating around the internet. I won't repeat them because I haven't validated that it's true, that thousands of people have died as a result of the vaccine. It's very hard to tie that unless they died like in a day or two. So these are people who apparently died within a day or two of getting the vaccine. The other thing that I want to point out is, guess what poses a greater risk to our population than the virus? Well, it's the cumulative effects of obesity. Obese people are more likely to develop dementia. Of course, they develop type 2 diabetes and cancer, kidney failure, heart disease, all because people can't restrict how much food they eat. Now, we can sit here and pontificate about the thrifty gene and all this sort of stuff, but it's all bullshit, because have you ever seen a fat person in a concentration camp where they're starving everybody? Did anybody ever go, we're all starving, but look at Joe over there, he's still 300 pounds? No, because if you don't eat a lot, you won't get fat. That's the bottom line. I don't care who you are. That is the God's honest truth. So the thing that poses the greatest risk for our population right now is obesity. Literally, hundreds of thousands of people die every week to diseases that are a downstream effect of obesity. So if you want to start posting on Facebook, don't be stubborn, get your vaccine, then I'm going to start posting on Facebook, stop pulling our country into a downward spiral and lose the weight and reverse your type 2 diabetes. People wouldn't love that. They'd come out and they'd attack me that I'm fat shaming people. I'm not fat shaming you. It's a known fact that if you are obese, you are going to get one of these diseases eventually. So I'm tired of people being crusaders. Just get the vaccine. No, I don't have to get the vaccine. It's my body. If I get COVID, I will suffer the consequences of that. And don't tell me, your obesity isn't hurting me, but me not being vaccinated, because your obesity is hurting me and everybody else in the country because of the lost productivity. And I have to pay a premium for my health insurance that factors in you fat bastards out there who are draining the medical society. You're draining medicine to try to keep you from being broken when you're breaking yourself. So if you're compelled to put something up on Facebook that says, just get the vaccine, you jerk, then be prepared for people to start picking things out about you that are ruining your health and hurting all the rest of us too, because you are. You're not just killing yourself. Insurance, lack of productivity. The list goes on and on and on. And plus, you probably teach your children to be fat, so you're passing that on to them. I'm tired of it. You know what? I don't tell people don't get the vaccine. I don't just randomly put that on. Don't get the vaccine. No, because that's your choice. It's your decision. Just stop this bullshit already. If you want to get vaccinated, get vaccinated. I don't want to get vaccinated. I don't have to get vaccinated. Don't try to guilt people into it, or I'll start pointing at your big fat belly and saying, hey, you're destroying America with your heart disease and dementia that's coming soon. And your family. What about your family? Don't you care about your family? No, you don't. You're just part of this political machine right now that's looking to divide our country even further over a friggin' vaccine. Think about that. All right, we'll see you tomorrow with more Supreme Radio. Thank you for being here today. Don't forget to buy Ben's book. Again, the website to learn more and order the book is shrnetwork.biz/Boundless Cookbook. There you go. All right, see you tomorrow. We got great shows and Casual Friday this Friday. So those of you who are jonesing for Casual Friday, we have an episode coming up. All right, see you tomorrow.